The following program contains scenes that some viewers may find disturbing.
Why would somebody want to harm our child? Why would somebody want to harm our daughter?
You know, neighbors, they were home and nobody saw anything.
Everybody was looking at everybody, and it was really almost a paranoia that I had never been seen in Aiken before.
Folks were nervous. We all wondered, is this person in our community stalking someone else? Who's next?
You know, who else could it be? It was just to the point where we were devastated.
I think I threw up in the trash can.
You cannot make this stuff up.
How do we connect the dots? How do we put him with Jessica Carpenter? Where the hell did he come from?
Aiken, South Carolina.
Aiken is just a horse town that everybody loves to come to. People retire here.
This is thoroughbred country and a growing polo mecca.
Been here 21 years. A very hospitable town. Take a lot of pride in their heritage here. Aiken definitely is a very safe community. You don't hear of, too much going on around here.
Very rarely ever get a call, maybe a barking dog. Never any violence. We trust everybody.
Then, one warm summer afternoon, life in this tranquil small town turns upside down.
I have not seen anything like that in my career, and I don't want to see it again.
I get off work at 5 o'clock in the evening and stop for make some errands. Nothing seemed out of sorts that day. Went in the front door. And her phone was ringing. She wasn't answering her phone, and Jessica always answered her phone. There she was. She was laying on the living room floor, and it shocked me, so I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if it was a prank.
Judy's 17-year-old daughter Jessica is naked and feels cold to the touch. This is no prank.
911, do you have an emergency?
Yes, I do. I come home, my daughter's laying on the floor nude, and she's been raped or something. Oh.
Possible 1035, St. Crosland Park.
Quick as you can.
Ma'am, is she breathing?
I don't know, honey. I don't know.
Judy, I need you to go in the house. Let me know if she's breathing. How old is she, Judy?
She's 17.
Okay, stay on the phone. Do you see any wounds on her, Judy?
They cut the phone cord and everything.
Judy, she's not breathing?
I don't think so. Her eyes are rolled back in her head.
Okay.
She's cold. She's dead. She's dead. I think she is. Please, somebody
Judy,
come her.
I got somebody on the way, okay?
One of my officers gets a call that a lady had come in and found her daughter down.
On the right.
Sergeant David Burton of the Aiken Public Safety Department is the first to respond.
And they called me. I came on around there. Victim's mother, she was hysterical.
I was in total shock. I didn't believe it, what I was seeing.
When I walked through the front door immediately to my left, there was a young lady laying there appeared to be deceased. I've been a police officer for 30 years, and I've never encountered one quite like this. We checked the residence, cleared the residence, made sure there wasn't anybody hiding whatever.
Detectives Dwayne Courtney and Ray Scott arrive soon after.
It was very apparent from first observation that this was a very brutal crime.
You could see the telephone cords wrapped around her neck, and they had been wrapped extremely tight. There was not a whole lot of blood, very little blood on the floor. So that told us early on that she was probably passed out or dead prior to the cutting of her throat.
She had been raped by a man, and I can only imagine the fear that that child must have felt. When I looked at Jessica lying on that floor, I had visions of my own daughter who was in school with Jessica and knew Jessica Carpenter.
I got a phone call, and it was Judy on the line, and she just kept saying, Jessica, Jessica. I said, Judy, what's wrong? She said, Jessica. I said, has Jessica been in a car accident? Next thing, our neighbor, George, picked up the phone. He said, Charlie, I need you to pull off to the side of the road. And that's when he told me that she had been killed. I was hysterical. I started questioning God and asking God why. How could this happen?
I got a phone call from the neighbor's house, and it was actually my mom. And she said, you need to come quick, it's Jessica. And I knew it. I said, she's dead, isn't she? She's dead.
Detectives Courtney and Scott get to work on the crime scene.
There were no signs of forced entry. The windows were all appeared to be shut tight. The back door, side door was locked.
This suggests Jessica willingly let her killer in.
Several things looked a little out of disarray. In the kitchen area, one of the drawers was open, while several of the knives were in.
There were signs that she had been made to disrobe in her bedroom. The murder weapon was not there other than the strangulation, which was the phone cord that was in the house. The only true physical evidence that we had was a partial fingerprint, and literally that was about the extent of it.
We called in the hounds. They did a sweep of the area, the backyard, and everything, trying to find any lead or anything.
News of the brutal killing shocks the town.
I mean, I wasn't even ready for it. I knew her, and she was a nice girl, but I just couldn't believe it. This happened to her.
It's a terrible shock when your heart just goes out to the family, and you just search for something to do.
With a killer on the loose, Aiken is on edge. Locals lock their doors, check their windows, and watch out for their children.
Jessica Carpenter's killer was cold. Took away a young 17-year-old girl for no reason. It was uncalled for. Uncalled for.
Folks were nervous, but at the same time, we all were nervous, and we all wondered how and why, and is this person in our community stalking someone else? Who's next?
In 2000, 17-year-old Jessica Carpenter is brutally raped and murdered in her South Carolina home.
The crime scene was horrible. It was probably the most brutal murder I've ever seen.
On a normal summer afternoon,
it happened in broad open daylight.
In an otherwise safe, small town.
The chances of you being murdered in Aiken are very, very remote.
The fact that it happened here just really scared the bejesus out of everybody who had teenage kids, young children. To find that this could happen here was just unthinkable.
Jessica Lynn Carpenter had everything to live for.
Jessica was high energy. Hard to keep up with, always on the go, but liked to do things.
Jessica was a lot of fun. She loved to tag along with us, loved to do whatever we were doing. She was very tender-hearted, very sweet. She was very caring, very easy to get along with.
We love you for your warmth and sharing, all your giving and your caring, all the love you always show, and we love the chance to tell you so. Happy birthday, little Mom and Dad.
She'd like to play basketball at church, and she was always in the pageants, and she was in band. She wasn't afraid of working, that's one thing. Jessica worked part-time at various restaurants. You couldn't go anywhere and nobody didn't know Jessica.
Jessica was ready to start her senior year in high school when this happened. She had a lot of ambition. I really think she was going places.
Jessica had dreams of becoming a top model, or maybe even a pediatrician. More than anything, she loved children and wanted to start her own family one day.
In her biography, she wrote about her life up until this point, and this is what Jessica wrote about her future. She said, I plan on doing a lot in the future. I want to become a pediatrician. I love kids, and I want to work with them and help them. I'm not sure where I will attend college, but I know it will be in North Carolina. My second career choice is modeling. I've always wanted to model. The only problem is with modeling is that I wouldn't be able to have kids for a while, and I want to have 4 kids. I have always wanted to have a big family. I wanted to live in a big house in Tennessee or North Carolina in the mountains, just like I did when I was growing up. Me and my husband are going to be great parents and care for our kids just like our parents did, and then some. I may not do all these things I have mentioned. Only God knows what I will do with my life, and who knows what He has in store for me. She had a lot of faith in God, and she believed that God held the key to her future. We did not know who would want to murder Jessica. Why would somebody want to harm our child? Why would somebody want to harm our daughter?
The scene of the crime yields little evidence, so investigators fan out across Aiken, searching for clues.
You start looking at anybody and everybody.
We began a neighborhood canvass and started our search by knocking on every door in the neighborhood.
Anybody see anything, hear anything, it doesn't matter how small it is. Let's work it.
It's a dead-end street, and, neighbors are facing directly to our house. They were home, and nobody saw anything.
The community of Aiken was literally on pins and needles.
Jessica's mother recounts her daughter's last hours to the police.
I was working, and Jessica babysat the neighbor boys, picked them up from basketball camp, got them home safely. She loved those children. I went home to have lunch with her. She's in there mixing up a box of macaroni and cheese, and we shared it. And it was time for me to go back to work. I left, I want to say probably 1-ish.
It's the last time Judy sees her daughter alive.
Jessica's autopsy revealed that she was in fact strangled manually by hands as well as the use of the phone cords. Her throat was cut. A culmination of all those factors is what caused her death.
There was very little arterial spurting, very little blood loss as far as what you would imagine if the person was still alive at the time. There was some type of cloth or something apparently he had used when he secured the knife and left with the knife.
Vaginal swabs were taken, and of course Ms. Carpenter's DNA and an unknown male DNA were found. We knew that the DNA was our only ace in the hole.
Isolating the killer's DNA signature is a big break, but without a match, it means nothing. Four days after the murder, a grieving family and community turns out for Jessica's funeral.
You would have thought the President of the United States had died by the number of people that were at the funeral.
It really amazed me how much integrity that child had, and impact that this community, you know, felt on this situation.
You try not to get personally involved, but how do you not become personally involved? And if you're human, our hearts ached for that young lady and for her family.
You know, you're burying your child. A parent should never bury a child. You know, your children should outlive us, and, you know, I wanted to trade places with her.
Investigators look at Jessica's family and circle of friends. The men are DNA tested. Nothing. Then, a neighbor tips police off about a strange young man hanging around outside Jessica's house.
He'd be crying and hollering and screaming. So she was concerned about it. She called us and let us know about it.
That, of course, raised some suspicions.
Who is this young man?
There just was a lot of talk about, did she have a boyfriend that nobody knew about? You know, because at this age, 17, a lot of girls will hide this kind of thing from their parents.
She had a guy she liked and they dated, but it wasn't really anything serious.
She always had her crush of the week. Didn't have a lot of serious boyfriends, though, but she had a lot of boys chasing after her.
Detectives discover the same guy is a regular at Jessica's gravesite.
Is this a close friend, or is this a potential suspect who is now starting to feel the pressures of what he's done?
It's the first solid lead, and detectives Courtney and Scott want to know more.
We installed some hidden surveillance video and audio to try and see if this person was maybe being remorseful and trying to somehow relate to Jessica how sorry he was for the crime or what had happened on that day.
The way he was acting was mighty odd.
White 20s, medium build, say 5'9".
We interviewed him, got DNA samples from him. As well, come back, not on file.
It's a dead end.
He was just a young man that, like a lot of them, hundreds of students at Aiken High School at the time, were just devastated.
Despite casting a huge net, not one of the young men matches the DNA of Jessica's killer.
We looked for any and everything that we could possibly think of that would put our unknown killer in contact with Jessica. Friends from school. Who was in the neighborhood on that given day? A lot of folks remembered the UPS guy making a delivery down the street, the mailman, the water meter reader, the garbage pickup folks. We tracked down every one of these people. We got DNA samples from them. If you were a male in Aiken, South Carolina, we were looking at you.
I can remember going down to the police station. They had young men lined up and their fathers were there with them, and they were being DNA'd because there was some association.
Everybody was looking at everybody, and it was really almost a paranoia that had never been seen in Aiken before.
2 weeks after the murder, a clue from cyberspace.
See Jessica's inbox.
We did a very thorough forensic search of Jessica's computer, which turned up some strange folks.
And one disturbing email.
Something to the effect of, live hard, die young, and leave a pretty corpse. That post was made just after her death.
Two weeks have passed since 17-year-old Jessica Carpenter was raped and murdered in her South Carolina home. A troubling email on her computer sends detectives in search of 24-year-old Phil Wiegand.
He was a young guy that lived out on the south side of town, lived by himself.
What we found was a man who was allowing young kids into his home. He was providing them alcohol, pornography.
He had emailed her just after the death. Live hard, die young, and leave a pretty corpse. Very strange.
Disturbing behavior, putting Wiegand directly under the police spotlight.
Okay, this was the guy. He fits a profile of somebody that would prey on a young person or a young lady by the activities that he had.
So at that point, we talked to him extensively.
Why would you be hanging out with teenage girls, showing them pornography?
It was a guy that obviously had some sexual issues going on with young folks. He really piqued our interest.
We got a DNA sample from him.
Live free, die hard, and leave a pretty corpse. It's a catchphrase. Kids say that. It's a joke. Yeah, it's a joke.
But once again, no DNA match. While he certainly had his issues, a killer he was not.
Another suspect zeroed out. A lot more disappointment. But they were right back on the path again to, looking for the next.
It's very, very frustrating when you think you're on the right path and then learn that it just is not it. It's just gut-wrenching to get negative DNA results.
In the investigation, when you're first going into it, when you start getting signs like that, you feel hopeful. You feel like you're really getting somewhere. And over the period and course of this investigation, it was like riding a roller coaster.
We felt like we were just drawing dead ends. And so we reached out to a team of personality profilers and give us their suggestions on who, if anyone, we needed to be looking at that we had not.
The job goes to profiler Michael Proden.
So, the basics. Male. No-brainer, we've got semen. Even without it, still male. Caucasian. Most violent crime is intra-racial. White on white, black on black, Asian on Asian, Latino, Latino. The age, late 20s, early 30s. He was able to come off with a ruse, able to have immediate control. This was not the work of some whacked-out 16-year-old on methamphetamine.
Which makes finding her killer all the more difficult. 2 months in, after DNA testing scores of men and interviewing hundreds more, detectives are at a loss.
The case was driving our local investigators absolutely insane, and I don't blame them.
I kind of hounded the police a lot. I asked a lot of questions. They called and asked me a lot of questions. And the same thing with Judy, but we hounded them just as much as they hounded us.
Don't know where else to look. We were devastated. We just did not know what to do.
We elicited help from other agencies all across the United States to get DNA swabs on potential suspects. Our DNA analyst was beginning to get a little frustrated with the number of DNA samples that we had submitted.
Detectives widen their net, and finally a glimmer of hope. A string of rapes and murders in nearby Augusta, Georgia grabs their attention. One victim survives.
I think he thought I was dead. Whenever he left his apartment, that man thought I was dead.
Chrissy Lee says they met in a restaurant parking lot. He asked for directions, then promised to take modeling pictures. She says she led him to her home.
Her description of her attacker leads the police to ex-sailor, 37-year-old Ronaldo Rivera.
Mr. Rivera worked at a local tire factory here in Aiken County. He was a married man, had children.
Ronaldo Rivera was very secretive with his wife. He led a very normal life, but in the after hours, away from home, he was very cunning and very secretive.
In October 2000, more than 2 months after Jessica's murder, detectives tracked the suspected serial killer to a hotel. They're almost too late.
Ronaldo Rivera attempted suicide at a local motel in the county of Aiken.
Let's meet out quick.
He left a note there in his room that said, "I did not kill Jessica Carpenter."
You hear me? Hello?
When he's well enough to talk, investigators grill Rivera about the Augusta murders. They suspect he's murdered several young girls in and around the Aiken area.
All of them were about the same age as Jessica Carpenter. A lot of them appearance-wise, the similarities were striking.
In the midst of all this, they're like, well, how many murders can we pin on him? Well, what about Jessica Carpenter? Did he kill her?
Take a good look.
Rivera swears he didn't.
I did not touch this girl.
The police aren't buying it. The victims have all been raped and strangled, and some, their throats cut, just like Jessica.
The note that he had left was just a cover-up for the one less crime he wouldn't have to be responsible for.
Detectives learned that Rivera had a well-honed M.O.
He would go into parking lots of different places, and he had been all around Aiken and just kind of approach people. And if he got any kind of pushback from somebody, then he would back away. That's why he never really raised big suspicions, because he wasn't a harasser. He was more of a flatterer. And so he would kind of talk his way into the good graces of the person and gaining their trust.
One young woman reports him to the police when he tries to pick her up.
Excuse me, hello?
He said he was new in town and he just wanted to get directions to some places. And while she was giving him directions, he continued to start asking her personal questions about what kind of guys she dated, is she interested in Hispanic men, and it made her feel uncomfortable.
All right. Have a good day. Nice meeting you.
2 weeks before Jessica's murder, he tried this same trick on 2 young women in Aiken. But this time, an onlooker phones police.
I explained to him about the complaint in reference to him. His exact words to me were, my hormones are kind of going a little crazy, so I was just trying to find someone to have a good time with, but I don't want to cause any problems, so if you tell me that I can't do it, then I'll stop it.
When Rivera's arrest hits the news, the woman who was harassed by him a few weeks earlier drops a bombshell. The passenger in her car that day was her friend, Jessica Carpenter.
No doubt about it, serial killer, similar victims, similar circumstances, same geographical area. He's the right kind of guy, okay? He's the right kind of guy.
Serial killer Ronaldo Rivera is the prime suspect in the murder of Jessica Lynn Carpenter. He matches the criminal profile, and he met Jessica 2 weeks before her death.
Of course, we learned that Rivera had been in physical contact with Jessica. We had 4 other female bodies that by that time had been identified as victims of Rivera. They lived in our community. We were ready to hang our hat.
Okay, you've got an individual who is able to run a con, he's sexually competent, has no problem killing individuals. He likes strangulation, which is up close and personal. So that's the kind of person that we're looking for. So you're at this high point in the investigation where you're like, yes, this is finally going to be over. We've got it.
It's got to be him. It's got to be him. I mean, he targeted young girls.
They DNA'd Ronaldo Rivera, and so we think, okay, in about 3 or 4 days, because it's such a high-profile case that the DNA will be back very quickly.
Investigators confidently await the lab results. When they come back, it's a shocker. No match.
It was a sickening feeling. Just to the point where, it's like you've been slapped in the gut, to where, who else could it be? We were devastated.
I think I threw up in the trash can. I honestly can't recall a bigger letdown in my career at that point or since then. I think literally you could hear the air being sucked out of the entire division. We just knew it was him, but it wasn't.
It looked very much so. I had my heart on it. When they, I thought, this is it, we got him. And when we found out not, it was very, very disappointing.
I cried. I was devastated. I really thought, okay, we've got closure, now we can understand it. But it was right back to square one.
Now just think of the odds of a young woman who is found raped and strangled to death in her own home, prior has at least a street contact with an individual who is a serial killer, bonafide serial killer, raping and strangling other women, and it not being the guy. You cannot make this stuff up. If anyone had wrote that in a story, you would go, please, it's the guy. And in this particular case, it wasn't.
As Ronaldo Rivera faces a death penalty for rape and murder of 4 teenage girls, Jessica Carpenter's case goes quiet.
People downtown were putting posters up and asking for leads. Rewards were put up, and just to find a person who committed this crime.
There are no new leads. But Jessica's family keeps hoping against hope.
We get through the birthday. We honor her every year at her graveside. We bring flowers and balloons, and family goes to dinner. We did make a public plea to set up a hotline for anyone to, call if they knew of anything. We had it in the news. We had it public as much as possible. We wanted to know. 2 years is a long time not knowing. We don't let it die. And everyone remembers that.
Everyone, including the detectives trying to find Jessica's killer.
It's very easy for investigators and agencies, when they're in that slump, if you would, to just kind of throw up their hands and give up. Aiken Police Department never did that. Those guys never gave up on it.
Especially Detective Ray Scott.
I took it personal. And I would hope, if anything ever happened like that to my daughters, somebody would really push herself to no end, to push it to the final limit to find out who did do that. And I felt that obligation to the family.
There were times that literally I would have to say to him, go home, take a day off, spend it with your family. We'll get there.
I was really worried about Ray. He was driven / obsessed / going crazy with all the paths we were going down that wasn't producing. I think he got real close to the Carpenter family, and naturally so. So he was having a really hard time.
10 months go by and nothing. Then, a bolt from the blue.
Detective Scott?
I received a call from the forensic technician. Said that we had a match.
Hang on a second.
I almost dropped the phone. It was such a shock, and I was too overwhelmed, so I got one of the investigators come in and finish the phone call while I tried to gather myself. It's a moment that I'll never forget as long as I live.
I think we went wild.
Police department called us and said we'd like to come to your home. We have something to tell you. And they came to our home and informed us they had the hit.
The match belongs to 31-year-old Robert Franklin Atkins, a resident of nearby Augusta, Georgia.
Ray and Dwayne came in and said, well, we've got our killer. I was just stunned. I mean, it was a total shock. What do you mean, 2 years and we've got our killer? The DNA matched.
It was just so shocking. How did this, person even come to be, in our home?
Detectives have been down this road before, so they're playing it safe.
You wonder, making sure that we did have the right DNA sample.
How do we connect the dots? How do we put him with Jessica Carpenter? Where the hell did he come from? Mr. Atkins was in prison, the Ware State Prison down in South Georgia. He had been returned to prison on a probation violation some months earlier. They took a blood sample and entered his DNA into the Dakota databank system.
Did Aiken police miss Robert Atkins in the CODIS system?
The state of Georgia had been collecting DNA samples from their inmates. The state of South Carolina was not that way at the time.
The police learned Atkins drifted around the southern U.S. He's been in and out of state prison for most of his life, but he's never been arrested for a sex crime.
We were not taking the CODIS hit as the Holy Grail at that point in time. Okay, we had a name, so he must have been in Aiken to do this crime. Who is he? Where was he?
They learned that Robert Atkins was a delivery man for a courier company in Georgia.
The Carpenter family had been to Chicago some weeks prior to the murder. They had rented a car, and apparently Mr. Atkins delivered a bill from that rental car company a week prior to the murder.
We were able to go back and track packages where he delivered them in Crosland Park at different places on his delivery routes.
In fact, Atkins brazenly delivered a package to police headquarters just 4 days after the murder.
My wife signed for it, and we were only 15 feet away. That's hard to describe how you feel. She was talking to the gentleman that had killed Jessica Carpenter. She sure was.
After 2 years and a slew of false leads, police in Aiken, South Carolina get a DNA hit on the man they think killed 17-year-old Jessica Carpenter. Detectives Dwayne Courtney and Ray Scott head to Ware State Prison in Georgia and confront former delivery man Robert Atkins.
It was very difficult sitting there across the table from him. I couldn't let my personal feelings get involved in it.
Detectives painstakingly lay out the evidence against Atkins. The hours tick by. Then the words Aiken police have waited so long to hear.
He did give up that he had killed Jessica. He confessed to it.
He said in his interview with Detective Scott that he just didn't have any choice but to kill her, that she had seen his face.
Detective Scott has one key question for Atkins. What happened to the knife he used to kill Jessica?
Ray called me that day and said, "Hey, I think we know where the murder weapon is. It's a knife from the kitchen, and it's located about a mile outside the city, up off of a small paved road used mostly by a clay company. It's been 2 years since this murder. What are the chances?" We found it. And it just closed all the other doors, all the dots connected, and finally we had our puzzle together.
August 30th, 2002. 11 days after the DNA match, Robert Atkins is charged with the murder of Jessica Carpenter.
One of the greatest days in my career, and I think I can certainly speak for Detective Scott, was to be able to meet with the Carpenter family and tell them that we had finally caught the person responsible for killing this beautiful young lady.
Detectives now know the full story. Sometime in late July of 2000, Robert Atkins delivers a package to the Carpenter house. That's when he first meets Jessica.
I think he saw what a beautiful young lady she was, and for some reason in his sick mind, he just couldn't get her out of his mind.
A few days later, his delivery route brings him back to the neighborhood.
Did he just wake up that day with never a thought in his head and go, "Oh, today I think I'll rape and murder someone"? No, absolutely not. He already has that idea in his head.
He did not have a delivery to the Carpenter home that day, but went to the home, knocked on the door, and once again, Jessica was home alone.
When she came to the door,
I need to get a hold of my boss.
He had made mention that he had dropped off a package by accident. She said that she don't think so. He said, well, can I borrow your phone?
He had already been there before. She had already seen him before. Nothing bad happened. The ruse of, I have something that needs to be taken care of,
Just take a second.
at the very least gets the door open.
At that point, apparently he had like he was dialing the number to work. He grabbed her, put his arm around her neck. The knife was retrieved. Took her down the hall to her bedroom where she was, at that point, derobed, sexually assaulted, then brought back down the hallway to the living room where he realized that she could recognize him, and he choked her down to the point of unconsciousness. He used both the phone cord from the kitchen and the living room and wrapped it around her neck numerous times. At that point, he cut her throat.
Atkins doesn't skip a beat. He continues with the rest of his deliveries, and at the end of the day, heads to the county courthouse to pick up his marriage license.
The day after this murder, Mr. Atkins got married in the floral department of a local grocery store.
When they said that he had gotten married soon after the murder, it didn't surprise me. Most people would think that the guy would be holed up somewhere. This guy didn't. This guy continued on as if it meant absolutely nothing.
It was pretty apparent by his interviews, Mr. Atkins had no remorse. I think he was an extremely cold and callous individual that just sees life a whole lot different than the rest of the world.
On Monday, May the 22nd, 2006, after years of legal delays, the Carpenter family gets their chance to confront the man who killed their daughter.
A part of my life has been taken from me. My life has been forever changed, but no one can take the memories.
We spent 2 years not knowing who did this, constantly looking at friends, acquaintances, coworkers, and neighbors with a suspicious eye.
Jessica, I will always love the girl that you were. So please forgive me for trying to forget you. Your big brother-in-law.
The killer faces his victim's family.
I know that the pain that I have caused you is unforgivable and unexcusable. I will forever regret the pain that I have caused you. I'm sure to stop.
As a child, the defendant was raped by his father and several others. The defendant was beaten throughout his childhood by both parents. He was routinely punched and kicked. The defendant's father is currently incarcerated in Oregon for kidnapping and raping a 9-year-old girl. The similarities between the father's crimes and what the defendant did to Jessica Carpenter are eerie as well, and telling. Like father, like son.
Pleading guilty, Atkins is spared the death penalty in favor of 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus another 30 years.
Mr. Atkins, I will tell you that through these events, I have learned that the creator of the world embody that.
We would like to thank God for all those dedicated public servants who have worked diligently and tirelessly throughout this process to ensure that justice was served. It has been a long journey, and we all have endured. Last but not least, I'd like to thank Jessica. We know you're smiling down from heaven, and in your own way thanking all of these people for bringing justice and meaning to your life. I know if you were here today, you would smile and say thank you to all of them for a job well done. Thank you, Jessica, for being a wonderful daughter and a special angel. We miss you very much. Rest in peace now, and we'll see you when we get to heaven.
feet first in the pine box.
I think this case just goes to prove the absolute importance of DNA evidence in today's society.
Thank the Lord we were able to get the DNA hit Curtis across state lines, from state to state. Because if it hadn't been for that, they could be walking today.
Jessica Carpenter, a life cut short but not forgotten.
Oh, I struggle all the time. There's not a minute or an hour of the day that Jessica doesn't cross my mind. Whenever we're all together, there's a void. There's such an empty place in our family.
It's left a big hole. You're always going, what would it have been like if she were here? You know, what would she have done? What would she have said? It's just this myth that kind of stays there.
In Jessica's memory, a magnolia tree grows in Crossland Park, a gesture from the people of Aiken.
She still lives on in everyone's hearts here, and it's been 11 years. People usually pass on, and you tend to forget them, but we keep her living.